let's get into our session. I want to introduce our speaker, Alex Strachan. Alex works with MNP out of Winnipeg. Alex is focused on problem solving and making sure that he has innovative solutions with farmers, with agribusinesses that he's working with. Everything from cost of production, financial analysis, strategic planning. Alex, I think I've given them a bit of a Cole's Notes of what it is that you're up to. Take it away, and we'll talk to you when we get to the Q&A session.
Awesome. Thank you, Lane. All right. So let's get right into it. So today we're talking about goals and objectives and kind of how do we go about that? We've covered, like Lane said, we've covered a number of topics to date on these webinars. Some abstract stuff in the mission and vision where it's a bit more deeper thinking. SWOT analysis, pretty technical, a lot of things to really look at. We've covered off a lot of good content so far. And so today, this is kind of the who, the where, and the how. So we call that our roadmap to success. So with that, I'm just going to summarize quickly what we talked about a little bit on the last webinar here. So in our last one, which was the mission and vision, we opened up with this question. We said, okay, what would success look like for me? And what would that look like for my operation, for my family, for my workers? All these different questions under what would success look like. So many participants shared with us that, for some it was, making X amount of dollars. For others, it was keeping the tradition in the family of working together. Others was, growing, always, evolving, using different technology. Everybody's definition of success is a little bit different. And, by answering this question for yourself, it allows you to create a really clear picture of what success looks like for you, for your family, and your operation. So keep that type of mentality in mind when we go through our exercise today. So our roadmap to success. So in this session, our goals and objectives session, we're going to be focusing on this roadmap that's going to lead us to success, hopefully. So we have talked about in previous webinars that we are really honing in on the importance of having some uncomfortable conversations surrounding who we are and why are we here and where are we going? Where is this operation going? And these types of questions and conversations are super vital to ensuring that everybody is on the same page, or at least pulling in the same direction. I really like that phrase of pulling in the same direction because, like many of you know, whether it be in business or in your personal life, you're not always going to be on the same page as everybody involved in a decision, an activity, what have you. But if you're all pulling in the same direction, that I really like that analogy, just because everybody has a different maybe method of gripping the rope, but at least we're all pulling the same way. So this is also really an important process for our strategic planning, which in itself is your own personal roadmap to success. So in our strategic planning, it helps us answer these really important questions that we kind of talked about on the last slide, where we say, who are you and where do you want to go and how do you get there? So today we're really going to focus on the how. So goals and objectives are how we get to where we want to go. But we really need to identify what there is. And it can be a number of different things, whether it be something that's a bit bigger picture or something a little bit more detail oriented on your operation. So keep that in mind when we're going through today. There's a lot of different ways to go about our goals and objectives, but it can be big picture or something very, very narrow, and we can really hone in on that. So with that, I wanted to take a quick poll here of, have you given some thought to where you're going and how you will get there? So my question would be, have you set any goals for your operation yet? Yes or no? And they can be formal, they can be a little bit less formal, but just I wanted to put that out there to kind of break the ice and get our poll going. We'll give you guys another maybe 30 seconds to a minute here to respond, and I'll kind of take a peek at what we're looking at for a mix. Okay. Looks like we have a little bit of a mixed bag of different answers as we go through. So this is good to see. You know, some people have set goals. Maybe this is the first time of someone exploring, you know, setting some goals for the operation. This is great. There's no right or wrong answer in these polls. And maybe going forward, actually, a little spoiler, there is a right and wrong answer later. But on this one, just an icebreaker to kind of get you familiarized. So as we go forward here, I just wanted to recover. We've covered this a lot in our webinars here. But I just really want to bring home the importance of this SWOT analysis and how it really brings our whole business plan together. And so when we go through these business planning workshops, it all goes back to our SWOT analysis. So we have our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And so essentially, each section of this SWOT analysis can help us identify different areas that we want to plan in terms of our business planning. So for those of you who have never heard of a SWOT analysis before, maybe we're, you know, for the first time talking about it, we have our first webinar on SWOT analysis recorded and on the FCC website. So if you're looking for some more information on that, pay that a visit and you can get up to speed on what we're talking about on this slide here. But for now, we will move forward and carry forward on creating goals and objectives. So when we're talking about goals, we have to be able to differentiate between goals and objectives. They sound kind of the same, right? But really it's important to set really clear goals and objectives, but understand their differences is good too. So goals are outcomes that you want to achieve, whereas objectives are the steps you need to take to achieve the outcome. So a quick example would be, you know, I want to be able to run a marathon, you know, by June of this year, right? Well, maybe that's my goal, but there's going to be certain objectives along the way that I need to reach. Maybe my objective would be to, you know, run 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks. That would be a shorter kind of steps to reaching that ultimate goal. So just something to keep in mind when we're talking about goals. But for this session, we actually will be focusing a bit more heavily on our goal setting methodology versus our objectives. So with that, I'm not sure how many people would have heard of SMART goals before, but SMART, S-M-A-R-T goals, it's a framework in which we need to be setting our goals with. So over the next 15 minutes here, I'm going to be going over this framework and each bucket here of these types of goal setting framework. So I will go into a bit more detail, but overall, this is, if you're going to take notes on one part of the presentation, I think that this would be the best part to really hone in on, as setting goals can be very vague and you can really miss a lot if you kind of breeze through goals. So I really want to emphasize that this is a very vital part to our goal setting process. So each letter here stands for something. I know we probably with the presentation it looked that way, but so the S, that is a specific goal. So our goals need to be crystal clear and as detailed as possible. So why? Why can't they just be, you know, I want to run, I just want to run forever and ever, right? That's not a very good goal. So they need to be specific, because we can't possibly hope to achieve something that is really abstract to us. Like being a better person, I mean, it's a great goal, and I hope that, you know, that's a great goal to have. I'm not going to tell you not to have that goal, but it really doesn't provide us any indication of how we're going to attain that goal, or, you know, where's the line in the sand? What am I comparing to, right? So being specific is super, super important, because when you look back after setting your goals and you're evaluating whether you've reached those goals or are working in the right direction towards those goals, if they're not specific, it's extremely difficult to be able to keep up with that. So that is a very, very important idea. And just to emphasize here, I get this question a lot when we're talking about setting goals, I've been asked, if it's so specific, well, am I allowed to have more than one goal? Well, absolutely you are, right? That's why we want to be specific in a large operation like farming. Many of you, I'm not sure what your backgrounds are on the webinar here, but there's probably a lot of areas in your farm or your operation in which you really, want to set a goal in. So just saying, hey, we want to be better at X. Well, we also want to be better at Y. That's okay. We can have two kind of lanes going at once here. So it's okay to be overly specific and to be able to stay in your lane on each goal. So the next letter, the M, they need to be measurable. So not only do they need to be specific, but they also need to be measurable, right? That makes sense. To be able to have a measurement helps us know when we've A, reached our goal, B, what is our metric, right? It pairs really nicely with being specific, because if we don't know how we're measuring success, it's really hard to envision attaining our goal. The goals we create have to have some sort of metric that we can track our progress, or at a minimum be able to say clearly, yes, we have accomplished our goal, we've done it. So again, an example back to that, I want to be able to run a marathon. Well, a marathon is, 20, well, I should know this, it's 26 miles, I believe. So, hey, if I can't run 26 miles, I'm not going to reach my goal. Or just getting across the finish line, that is measurable. So between specific and measurable, we're really starting to build on our goal setting methodology here of how it needs to be. So our next letter, achievable. So this one is also very important, because shooting for the stars doesn't always provide us the landscape to really achieve the goal that we have in mind. So if our goal was to reach $10 million in sales, but we don't have the means to do so and never have, it's not overly helpful for us to set that lofty of a goal and have it be so unattainable. So personally, I'm not a big runner, right? So I'm going to go back to that marathon goal. It might not be an attainable goal to say, hey, I'm going to run a marathon next weekend. I get tired after 5 or 10 minutes on the treadmill. I do my best, but I don't think it's an attainable goal for me to say that, hey, I'm going to be able to run a marathon in 1 week. So, maybe that my goal, we have to readjust what we're thinking. So maybe a longer term goal, that's a better idea. But it's super important to set stepping stones for yourself that you can celebrate, so you can feel that notable progress. So if a goal for the next 2 years was to reach $1 million in sales, and then we can maybe increase that number as a separate goal the following 2 years, then we're still, reaching our attainable goals while also growing towards an ultimate goal. But just going outright and saying, hey, I want to do $10 million in sales this year. I mean, if it's not attainable on your operation, then we need to be able to set kind of some lines in the sand to get there. So maybe it's a bigger picture type goal where we're saying, hey, we want to expand our land base by twofold in the next decade. That's a nice goal, right? That could help us reach our $10 million in sales, perhaps. But it requires other things to happen, other goals to be met before we can get there. So one other thing I will say is unattainable goals can be really exciting at first, right? Having, $10 million in sales, that's amazing. I wish that was us, right? But that enthusiasm and commitment can really fade over time as, if that goal stays impossibly out of reach. So we really have to keep that in mind when we're setting these goals, that they really, really do need to be clear and achievable. Because if they're not, well, that makes it really hard for us to, stay on the path and really keep working towards our goal. So that takes us to our next letter, the letter R. Relevant. That sounds kind of blatantly obvious, but sometimes we can get a little off topic when we're talking about goal setting. So they need to be relevant to your overall business plan and strategy. So if your goal on the farm, overall your mission or your vision was to sell the farm. We want to sell the farm by the time we're 60 years old and we have no kids or whatever. But then your goal is to do $10 million in sales when we've only ever done one. Those kind of work against each other, right? One kind of suggests that we're looking to grow. The other suggests that we're winding down and looking to get out. So I'm not saying those aren't good goals to have, but your goals still need to remain relevant to what your mission and vision statement are saying that we're setting out to do. So when we look at our business plan, we need to make sure that our goals are aligned with the direction that we want to be going. And that's just how it needs to be. I mean, we can have separate goals as individuals within the operation, but it really does need to relate back to what you're hoping to achieve. Because again, if your area of interest is growth, your goal should be a piece of the puzzle that will help you get there. So having a goal that is not aligned with that path or that, that roadmap to success, it's not a goal worth including in your formal business plan, right? And you can have personal goals outside of the farm, and that's great. And they can be, I wanna lose 10 pounds. That's fantastic. But maybe that doesn't have anything to do with growing the farm, and that's okay. But when it comes to your business plan, when yourself or any of your stakeholders or anyone external from the farm is looking at your business plan as a whole, they should be kind of connecting the dots in their head as they go through, saying, okay, that goes with that, and oh, that's a great goal to have as they're looking to do this in the future. So these are things that you need to be conscious of when you're setting your goals, to kind of stay focused and stay on target. Which take us to our last one, time frame. This one I've always found to be the most, well, not the most important, but one of the ones that we forget about when we're setting a goal. So if you're familiar with this framework, you're saying, well, yes, I know it needs to be time frame, but that's not for everybody, because some people say, hey, we're maybe really close to $10 million in sales. Let's just go get it. Okay, but by when? How are we going to do that? So the time frame really allows us to set a line in the sand in the future for us to be checking in by. So again, if my goal was to run a marathon, and I said by June, well, here in Manitoba, there's a Father's Day marathon every year, so that's logical for me. But if I don't set a timeline, then how am I supposed to check in and see how I'm progressing? So if it's March the 19th today and it's June 25th is the marathon, well, how am I doing on May 1st? Am I feeling confident that I'm making progress towards being able to do what I set out to do by June? Or on the contrary, if you're looking to grow your acres by twofold in the next 10 years, how are we doing 3 years in? How about 5? And maybe in this scenario, it's not possible to double in one shot. But if we're saying, hey, you know what, that quarter section came up for sale 2 years ago, we scooped that up because we were able to. But now we're only 7 years out. We need to keep looking for opportunities. So having a time frame really allows you to kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, I need to check in. You don't have to check in halfway, but it gives you logical points to say, when do I need to check in? Or if I said, hey, we need to accomplish X in a year later, have we accomplished that? Instead of just waiting, oh, we finally accomplished the goal. Well, maybe it's been 3, 5, 7 years, and maybe that goal isn't relevant to the direction of our operation anymore. So these are all some things that all tie together when we're talking about setting goals. So kind of to summarize, when you lump this all together, I would say a lot of people who set goals, whether it be for their business, for any of you who maybe work off farm, maybe you've had a performance review that required setting goals for the new year or for midway through the year. I know in prior roles, I've had to go through this a lot with managers of mine, and they always would challenge me on, well, is it specific enough, or is it well, that's great, but it's not measurable. Work harder or be a better person. That's tough to measure. But when you put these all together, it really gives you a very powerful goal that when you put on paper or in your business plan or amongst your business partners or family, that really anybody who picks up this goal and takes a peek at it and reads through your business plan and sees this goal, it makes sense. And they say, okay, this grain farm wants to add acres. They want to add this many, and that's achievable. If I'm a 3,000 acre grain farm and I want to double, it's a lot of acres to add, 3,000. So maybe Maybe that isn't achievable in your area if you're hoping to have, all your land in one area. But that one I will leave up to the specific example that might be out there for you. But maybe that's not an achievable goal. Maybe adding 1,000 acres over the next 5 years is more accurate. And then that brings in the relevant piece again, where we said, hey, we want to grow because we want to make sure that our next generation of family members who are running this farm can live off of the operation, but I can also, secure my, life after the farm as well. So all these things need to be working together as well in tandem with your business plan. So your mission statement, your vision statement, where are we going? Who are we? Why do we wake up in the morning to do this? All of these things need to kind of layer in when we're setting our goals on the operation. So that takes us to our first poll question. So I'll give you guys maybe a minute here to poll on this one. So I know sometimes it takes a minute to pull it back up. But the question would be, we're going to do a little quiz. We're going to test what you have learned in the last few slides, and I want you to tell me if you think the goals that I have on the screen are, a good, clear, smart goal, or if they're not. So the first question would be, so if this was our goal, I want to earn $500,000 on, of revenue on soybeans next year. Would that be a clear, smart goal or an unclear, smart goal? I'll open up the poll. Seeing some polls come in, I'll give everyone maybe another 30 seconds to catch up, and we'll see what we end up with on this first question. Okay, so close one here. We've got about half and half saying some think it's a clear goal or a clear smart goal, incorporating all of the components of a SMART goal, and about the other half say it's not. So the answer is, I would say it is not a clear SMART goal. And the reason I say that is it's lacking some clarity. Like there's no how or no context. And we don't even know if this is realistic or not, right? So the S part is a little unclear and the R is actually unclear as well. So that's, I don't know if I'm a 300-acre farmer, I don't think I can pull off 500,000 soybeans next year. That being said, I will give credit to this goal here that it is measurable because we put a line in the sand of $500,000 of revenue. We've given a time frame next year, so next crop year we want to do this, but I would recommend a more specific metric. So, I would rather have said revenue per acre or yield per acre or gross margin per acre or something along those lines. It's a bit more specific where even though the 500,000 might be implied if you have 1,000 acres of soybeans, it's kind of implied that those things are in there. But as a producer, that has a lot to do maybe with the goal is to market your grain better. Maybe the goal is to grow it more efficiently with nutrients or have some soil testing and agronomists come out. So you can kind of start to see where, even though a good goal to have to say, hey, this is what we want to do, it does require a bit more. We're allowed to hone in a bit more on these goals to say, okay, I want to get soil tests this year. I want to make sure I'm not over fertilizing. I guess on soybeans, you're not really fertilizing a ton, but we're not overdoing it, underdoing it. We want to really hit our mark on this many bushels an acre, and hopefully, another goal could be we want to market our grain at this level per acre. These are all things to consider. So tough question. It's a little nitpicky, but that's the point of these exercises, is to take realistic goals like this one and and really take it in and really hone in on what you really are trying to accomplish. So that takes us now to our next one. Second question. Again, we're asking if this is a SMART goal, clear or unclear. So when I say clear, I mean, does this qualify as a SMART goal? And when I say unclear, what is it not a SMART goal by the parameters outlined with the SMART? Okay, that poll should be live for you. And the question is, or the goal that I've stated that's up for debate is increase or improve animal welfare over the next 2 years. Let's see what you think. All right, I'll give another maybe 30 seconds as we see some poll answers come through, and I'll see how you guys made out with this one.
That last one, Alex, was absolutely a horse race. It was going back and forth. And this one, so far with what I'm seeing, is a little more clear cut. But I'll admit, you had me questioning, because I saw it was measurable. So I thought, well, that's going down the right path. But you made some good points.
Right, and like I said, it is a little nitpicky of a process, but that's why we're here, right? And so it looks like about 90% of people are saying this one does not qualify as an SMART goal, and they are absolutely right. So this one actually, I'd say, is close as well, right? It has a timeline, and it seems realistic, it seems attainable. However, the only thing it's lacking is a metric of measurement, right? So, I mean, if you're in this business, maybe it's logical to you what that is. So I was maybe being a little unfair, but how do you want to measure this? How can you go back and say, yeah, we did it? Well, is it maybe, if you're in poultry, is it improving your square footage per bird? Maybe is it lowering your death rate? These are all different metrics that it's up to you. You're the one setting the goal, but now it looks like we're starting to kind of trend in the right direction of understanding, okay, this is a great goal, by the way. This is a fantastic goal, but I would love just to see, I know right now, by 2030, I think they're looking to improve square footage per bird, and then by 2035, improving that even further. So these are lines in the sand that actually the government associations have put out, at least on the poultry side, on the egg production side, that they're putting the lines in the sand for us. That's kind of where I got this one from. But again, it looks like 90% of people agreed. So that takes us to our last one. Our last question is, the goal is to have a higher staff retention rate. What do we think? Smart? Not quite smart? Let's see in the poll. So I'll give you guys another maybe minute here to get your answers in while we see these answers start to come in. I'll leave another maybe 20, 30 seconds here while we see the last of the answers come through. Okay. So same as last one, I think that we're starting to get through to everybody. We have about, a good chunk of everybody is saying this is not a SMART goal, and I agree. So, I mean, it might not be a great SMART goal, but it is a really great goal to have, right? Just like the last one. A better version of this might include what metric or what area you're looking to improve on this. So maybe this goal would be to retain 90% of new staff over the first 3 years of their employment, or maybe a secondary goal here could be to add, if you have some maybe constraints, maybe it's to add 2 staff members in the next year to alleviate, a lot of overtime during peak season, or to allow others or every worker to have work-life balance. It's a great goal, but it lacks measurability, but it's specific, and it could be a little bit more specific, and we need a time frame on this one. So this one actually was, I think, a little bit easier than the last two, especially having it be last. But again, I just want to be clear that we're being very nitpicky on purpose, because we want to make sure that you guys really understand that, good goals are great, but great goals are better. So that is all for our polls. Thank you for your participation. But now I want to go kind of another layer deeper on the types of goals that we can set for our operation here. So we went through kind of the framework of how to set a goal, but now we're going to talk about the areas in which we can set those goals. So we kind of have 6 buckets or 6 types of business goals that we have, and they include, the vision, marketing, operational goals, people, goals surrounding people, financial goals, and transition. So these are areas, we call them KPIs, key performance indicators, which help you measure your business's success. So the reason why we kind of hone in on this is really to help focus those areas in which we need to start looking. So this kind of outlines our kind of the way it goes. So vision is forward, transition is kind of on its way, and then the others kind of fall in between. So we're going to start with vision. So we covered a ton of this in our prior webinar. This is really the bigger picture view of what we're hoping to achieve. So this might be a bit more, a vision type goal will be a lot more specific than our actual vision statement. So if, our vision statement was, our goal is to be a leader in animal welfare in our RM while producing gross margin of X. Well, what is the measurable aspect of that goal, right? Like we talked about in our example, is it square footage per animal? Is it death percentage? Is it our goal to achieve a certain metric there by a certain time frame? To be able to stand by our vision of leading the way in animal welfare. So you can kind of start to see how these things kind of cross over and go together with one another. Whereas if our vision statement was to be the leader in our area, or our friend group, or RM, of having the best animal welfare program, well then what are some goals to help us get there and to stay true to that vision statement? So that's how I like to kind of ease into this, is saying, well, we have a vision statement is very easy to kind of relate to, right? Everybody, I know anyone who's been on this webinar prior to this one, we spent a ton of time on, well, where are we going and what does that mean? And so behind that, there has to be some stepping stones to be able to maintain or achieve that long-term vision. Then that takes us into our marketing area. So how do we, as one example, maintain quality relationships with our customers? So we have to think about this one a little bit differently, because in agriculture, a lot of us, are our customers really our customers? I say that because a lot of our people we sell to actually are coming asking for our business, right? So if you look at a grain elevator, they're asking everybody to come, please sell to me. It's kind of a reverse relationship. And so in marketing, I actually prefer to focus on the relationship aspect of the transactional nature of your business. So my grain elevator example is perfect, because they're asking for your product, yet you are the customer, even though you're selling to them. So my thoughts on this is how do you maintain a good working relationship with these contacts? What are some ideas for a goal here? And just saying, well, I want to improve my relationship with people I sell my product to. I don't think that's a very smart or SMART smart goal. Perhaps a better way to manage this type of goal is to outline your intentions, right? Maybe it's as simple as, hey, have one lunch a year with each customer rep every year. It's simple, but it's intentional, has clear measurement, timeline, is realistic and specific, it's relevant, right? So it's just a very simple goal that might feel silly writing on paper, but these are things that actually make a big difference in maintaining these relationships with your customer base. So operationally, so our operational goals. So maybe it's surrounding how do we be sufficiently productive, output focused. Maybe how do we consistently turn high quality products and our services? So unlimited options here. Are we going to focus our goals on an efficiency metric, quality? Are we going to focus on safety, environment? Look to your weaknesses and your opportunities out from your SWOT analysis here. Do we have an opportunity to really hit our stride if we had more bodies on the farm, right? Do we lack the structure in our processes maybe? If we're going for better efficiency, higher efficiency, in what area, right? How are we going to do that? Are we, this one might hit home for some of you, do we want bigger machines? Do we want maybe more staff that we can run more shifts? There's tons to unpack on this one, right? So this is where we really want to be make sure that we're super, super specific, right? And again, to reiterate, we can have multiple goals. One goal does not have to fix all of our problems, right? If we hope to have better yields on soybeans, going back to my first example, there's a lot of ways we can do that, right? Maybe we missed our optimal seeding time frame because we were short-staffed. Usually it's weather related, but maybe we're short-staffed and somebody quit, whatever. Maybe we wish we had a bigger piece of equipment. Maybe we just needed better soil science and better a fertilizer plan or chemical timing. There's so much we can do with each type of, I don't even know what to say on this one. Each type of goal we can put in operations, we just have to be very, very, very specific so we know that we can attain it. And that brings us to people. I've kind of touched on this kind of throughout here, but how do we ensure that we have a skilled team that is consistently or constantly wanting to get better? How do we ensure that we have a highly motivated team that actually wants to be a part of our operation? So this one, again, you have to be specific. There's a lot, when goals involve people, it's so easy to get abstract, right? Well, we want to do this. We want people to feel this. But how are we going to ensure that our team is all willing and wanting to, again, pull in that same direction? Do we have the right people? Or are we actually helping them reach those goals that are theirs and that align with ours? And what are some things that we can measure to help with some of these questions? So when it comes to people, how do we measure people's happiness? Is it retention? Is it, the willingness to ask questions? Is it including them in certain meetings? There's a whole lot of different things that we can track and that we can keep kind of track of that to make sure that we're able to measure this. And that takes us to financial goals. So how do we manage success with our gross margin, expenses, net income, cash flow? These are all kind of buzzwords around financial success. But for many, simply just tracking or understanding the financials is the biggest hurdle, right? So we need to be able to understand what our numbers are saying and what they mean if we hope to really improve on anything. So maybe for some, taking a course or workshop on financial statement fluency as part of their development plan, that's a great goal. For others, they may, strive to achieve certain metrics, like we've talked about gross margin per acre. Or maybe for some, they never want to use their operating line for more than a month. They want to have it paid off at the end of each month. Maybe for some, a goal would be to better understand their ebbs and flows of cash flow to better plan their operations and their sales tactics. These are all really good thoughts, and there's not one good answer for this one. But again, be specific. And this one can kind of sway to more, it could flow up to operations, it could flow to people, better understanding knowledge management, could be under marketing. There's a lot that can go in this one. Transition, kind of our last bucket here. So the three questions we always ask is who, how, and when. So this is really the most specific to your farm and the people in it. So we really need to understand everyone's take and reach for a goal that everyone can be included in. So we kind of covered this in mission and vision, and really this transition, the idea of a transition plan or transition planning within the farm, or maybe getting outside help. We do a ton of this with our clients, that we really challenge them to actually voice what their aspirations are within or outside of a business, right? And this allows us to really focus on, or have everyone be able to focus on the similar goal. So when we're talking about pulling in the same direction, well, if mom and dad want to sell out, but the kids want to keep farming, they're pulling in two opposite directions. So this is something where, this kind of in the webinar has followed the mission and vision, but this one I think kind of goes together with it, and having everyone aligned and understanding, the steps that are required to get where you need to be. Okay, so how do we stay on track, right? This is always the tricky part. You set a goal. What do? It's easy to set goals, right? We just went through a workshop. I'm good. I've set my goals. I'm better for it. Well, hold on. We have some best practices that we like to cover off here. And, so the best ways that I would say to ensure you execute your goals, number one, biggest one, measure the measurable aspects of your goals. I'm going to say it again, measure them. The thing that is measurable for your goal, you have to measure it, right? So if that means quarterly check-ins with yourself, stakeholders, but you need to know if you're on track, or if you need to change the goal as you go. So, I think that keeping track of your progress on the goal is actually more important than putting the green check mark next to it. For anyone who's maybe, worked off the farm, a lot of companies have measurable goals for their employees, right? And they typically check in annually, semi-annually, to see how you're doing and to check to see where you're at. So if your goal was to, sell 100 pencils, well, we're 6 months into the year. Have you sold 50? Have you sold 60, 30? Where are we? How are we doing? So your farm should really be no different. If you set out to earn $250 an acre of gross margin on wheat, well, how are we doing come July? We've already spent our money on our inputs. Maybe we've pre-sold some grain, but how are we doing? Are we on track? Some of that might be out of our control with the markets, this and that, but how can we know if we don't check? We've spent what we've spent. Hopefully we feel good about that. Maybe we start picking away at good prices in the market that we think that will help us towards our goal. But really, to check in, it really helps us see if we've misunderstood part of what we're trying to do. So it's really, really important to have these accountability checks. Oh, I actually forgot to keep clicking forward. So the quarterly check-ins and performance reviews, that kind of is all encompassing. But, oops, went one too far. So stay true to your timeline. So I know I said you can kind of change the scope of your goal or kind of pivot here and there, but if you set out to do something in 2 years, at that 2-year timeline, where are we, right? Keep that in mind as you're 1 year out. Hey, I'm halfway there. Am I actually halfway there? So that's something that stay true to that timeline, reevaluate come the time of the end of your timeline. And one more thing, I think I would put a fourth one in here, is who else has input to the success of your goals? So how are they managing their part? So it's not always just me. If we're hoping to make a certain amount of dollars per acre, I want to make sure that if I'm not the only decision maker on when we sell the grain, when we buy feed, what have you, there has to be other people in this conversation. So that's something to keep in mind. So that kind of takes us to our discussion portion of the webinar here. And I think, Lane, if there was any questions throughout the webinar here, let me know, and I can definitely cover some off. And I've also got a few FAQs that I can cover if we have time.
Sounds good. So the first question actually was tied to your last slide there. Um, is all around quarterly check-ins. So the question was, should this be a meeting? Should it be an email to the team? Should it be a whiteboard in the shop, or all of the above? How do we report back on it, I guess?
I think that's a fantastic question. I really like that question. I love that you gave me options to work with. So I actually love the idea of the whiteboard in the shop, but I don't think it needs to only be that. Like, I think it's good to formalize the tracking of these goals. So that doesn't mean it has to be scary or, hey, come into my office, big time meeting coming up. It can be, hey, schedule a check-in. If it's with everybody, I think it should include everybody that's involved in the goal, or has maybe a little bit of a piece of the goal. But I think it's completely okay to check in one-on-one as well. So I'm not trying to be vague here, but I think there is an important aspect of formalizing the check-ins. But at the same time, I think that keeping it light in some aspects, like the whiteboard in the shop, I think that's a great way. It's almost more of a round table aspect where everyone feels maybe a bit more willing to put up their hand and say, hey, I think actually that I've got a way we can, get there. Or I've been seeing, we're maybe off track. Whereas when you're in a bit more of a formal setting, you call everyone into a big important meeting, it might suppress some creativity and some willingness to speak up, especially maybe for those outside of the ownership piece of the farm, right? So if you have a few employees, I think they're less willing to speak up, generally speaking. Maybe your farm has a different mix, but I would say generally speaking, they might have a tougher time speaking up. Whereas maybe one-on-one, you say, hey, how's it going? And maybe you don't ask them directly, do you think we're going to achieve $250 an acre of gross margin on wheat? Maybe you leave it out that part, but you might say, hey, how do you think our crop plan is looking? Do you think we did a good job do you think we seeded at the right time? I don't think we did. I think we were a few days late. Okay. I mean, we can't change that, but at least that helps us measure, okay, well, the guys in the field said they think we were a few days late on putting in seed. So maybe that's going to affect our yield targets, which might affect this. It's gathering information while also feeling like everyone's included. Does that make sense? I think email check-ins are my least favorite. They're a bit because they kind of create a transactional nature and almost an over the shoulder. That's my experience with them. If someone says, hey, where are we at on this? It doesn't always encourage open conversation. It encourages a response.
Yeah, and I think you want to have something that's consistent enough that it doesn't feel like, whoa, why is everyone being pulled into the board meeting or to the boardroom or to the shop for this meeting? And so things like the whiteboard can actually help because it kind of keeps it front and center for people, kind of top of mind.
100%. That's why I loved having those options because it let me kind of run with that. So I think it's a mix of whiteboard, formal sit downs, and a bit of one-on-one time with the people that make it happen.
All right, next one, Alex. Shouldn't goals be more broad than the objectives specific? Is this a good goal? An example is the next generation will farm their half section plus 820 acres of the exiting generation.
Okay, so I would say that's more of a vision, which is great. I'm not saying that's not a great
Yep.
goal. I mean, you could say it's a goal as well because maybe all the pieces of the puzzle aren't figured out yet. I would say maybe that's why it's been written as a goal. I mean, that's measurable, right? You said, but I think that when you might not want to say by this year because things change. That timeline often moves with transition and how that works. So I think the timeline kind of gets left out of that one. I'm not saying it's not a good goal. There's plenty of good goals out there that don't fit this framework. That being said, I would think that would be more of a vision statement to say, hey, we strive to make this a multi-generational farm by ensuring the next generation has the tools and land base to be able to support their families.
And so this is a comment, I think it ties directly into this, and here's the comment. Is it fair that there is no right or wrong goal? I've heard getting it written down is a big step in the right direction. So a bit of a
100%.
comment.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong goal. I think that goals help shape you as, directionally. So I would say a wrong goal if we're going to be really unfair, would be one that doesn't align with your mission and vision, right? Like I said, if we're saying we want to grow the farm to be 50,000 acres, but mom and dad want out and they don't want to sell it to me and my brother, well, then that's maybe that there's a disconnect. So I think I feel like I'm maybe copying out on that one, but I don't think there's a right or wrong goal, generally speaking. But I think there's a way that you can help set yourself up for success by being very critical of the way you make these goals. So if you think you have a good goal, take it through the SMART, the SMART goal framework, and maybe nitpick a little bit or break it off into two goals if you feel like it maybe isn't specific enough, or maybe it gets a little wishy-washy with how measurable it is. I would say when in doubt, set a few goals and see how they shape up. Is that a fair response?
Yeah, I think for sure it is. And I mean, I think it was a bit more of a comment / question, kind of no right or wrong answer, but I think taking it through the SMART makes perfect sense. Next one. Farms offering financial incentives for owners, staff. So kind of coming out of these goals, you've achieved some of them. Having rewards specifically tied to that. Comments, thoughts? I'm adding the comments, thoughts, but that was just question mark, question mark.
Yeah, I think that's completely up to the kind of the management team. I think that if it's tricky because a lot of the time, this is where if you have that structure in your compensation plan with the ownership group, staffing group, this is where it becomes super important to have very specific and measurable all these SMART goals, because how I've seen a lot in not just agriculture, but in a lot of businesses, you see, oh, we had a good year, well, I've had an example where a friend, they work at a company, they said, oh, we had a really good year, and they gave everybody, a $200 Amazon gift card at Christmas time because they had a good year. That's wonderful, right? But there wasn't really any clarity to what a good year meant, or what behavior was tied to your reward, right? So I would say not be careful. That's not a fair comment, because you want to reward your staff if that's your structure and your ownership. But I would say be very clear on the goals to achieve that compensation, because if there's disconnect between those trying to earn that compensation and those giving it, it can get a little bit tricky. Whereas if we said, hey, we want to achieve $250 of gross margin an acre on average on the farm. Well, the guys in the field, they can't control what the ownership group bought the fertilizer and the seed and the chemical at. So I feel like, it's a great goal, and if they want to be compensated on, that's great. But I feel like you need to have a certain level of contribution that can earn that reward, and just some clarity on it would be good as well. But it's up to you if you want to, stroke checks for Christmas bonuses. I think that's well within your rights and power. I think that's wonderful. And honestly, when people get handed, a reward, and they're like, oh, great year, and a tap on the back, that there doesn't have to be any goal or formality behind it either. But just since the question was arised, that would be my thought, is that if you're going to have that type of structure, just be very clear and make sure that these goals are fit this framework, so everybody on either side can understand kind of the result of the goal.
All right. I think the last question I have from the group is, how important is the review and documentation after the year? So maybe you've met some of your goals, maybe you haven't.
I think that's probably the most important. I think that's why we set these goals, right? So if we set a goal out for a year from now, a month from now, 2 years from now, when you sit down and say, okay, how do we do? That's kind of, in my opinion, the whole point of making these goals, is to be able to look back and say, did we achieve the goal? If we did, what did we do right? What did we learn? And same thing, we didn't. Well, what changed? Or did we just maybe not hit the goal? Was our goal too lofty? Was it realistic? Or did just the scope of our business change? Right? So if we had, trying to think of a good example here. Well, the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of businesses, right? And they might have had certain goals based on certain business behaviors and tactics. but things really took a shift, and that's an easy kind of out to say, the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of businesses. But when you actually look at the kind of just the very narrow focus of, we set out to do things this way, we want to go see 1,000 new clients every year in person. Well, as we all know, that was not an option. So that kind of the way you need to do business changed. So if your goal was to see 1,000 new clients in person that year and you saw 10, looking back, you say, okay, well, what changed? Okay, well, do we need to maybe change the scope of our goal and say, hey, we need to, maybe, I don't know what the business would be, but maybe you send out mailers, maybe you do different types of advertising to connect with new clients. The goal is still the same. You want to reach 1,000 clients, but just the how and the metric in which you're measuring it can change. And so I think that the check back, or the checking in, is super important, because if you do quarterly check-ins and you're a quarter of the way through and something in your environment has completely changed. So maybe I'll go back to the making X amount of dollars on a acre of wheat. Well, if the price of wheat tanks by 50%, maybe it's time to reevaluate what that goal is. And you can still keep that goal of, hey, we want to do X per acre, but maybe you say, okay, well, the environment in which we're operating in has changed. Maybe we need to shift our focus to a different metric or change that metric. I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I'd be careful with changing goals, but the whole point of check-ins is to see, are we on the right path? And if that path has taken a hard turn, we need to be able to say, okay, well, what does that mean for our goal? And do we need to readjust to kind of achieve a similar or the same goal in different?
No, I think for sure all of these are situational. People need to take it and make it make sense for their business. And I think you've given us, over the last 45 minutes to an hour here, you've given us the kind of groundwork to do exactly that. And as I look at the 6 types of goals: vision, marketing, operational, people, financial, transition, those are all things that I'm sure everyone on the call can continue to build into their goals and objectives. So thank you very much, Alex, for spending the hour with us. We're going to be back here again this same time next week, and I'm excited about that one around financial literacy. I think that one's really going to be a key one, because that's an area that I think all of us could use some advice and additional assistance with. So stay tuned for that one. Sign in if you have the chance, please do. With that, we mentioned before, a recording will be available of this, as will all of the series, so you can check in and follow up with all of them. We'll also email out an evaluation form. Give us your feedback. What did you like on this? What could we change to make it better for you? Register for that one. And with that, we'll let you get back to the rest of your day. Thanks so much for spending the time with us, and we'll see you next week, hopefully, for our last session. Take care. Thanks very much.